It was a Wednesday morning in June. School was almost out for the summer. She had a project due that day. She had almost made it out the door when she realized she'd left it behind. So she turned around. She waved goodbye to her sister and her friends, and she took a shortcut through the woods. She was 14 years old, and she was never coming home. My name is Savannah Cole, and this is what they left behind. Before I tell you this story, I need to tell you something about where I'm from. I grew up in Atlanta. I know Southwest Atlanta. I know Campbellton Road. I know what those neighborhoods looked like in 1995. The apartment complexes, the summer heat, the kids walking to school in the morning, because that's just what you did. I was not much older than Nacole Smith when she died, and I remember the way this case sat on the city, the way it stayed, the way people who lived near those woods never quite forgot what happened there on a Wednesday morning in June of 1995. Some cases stay with a city the way a scar stays on skin. You stop noticing it after a while, but it never goes away. This is one of those cases. My name is Savannah Cole, and this is what they left behind. Nacole Smith was 14 years old. She lived with her mother Aquinelia in the Deerfield Apartments off Campbellton Road in Southwest Atlanta, a working neighborhood, a community that knew its own. Nacole was a straight-A student, the kind of student teachers remember. Focused, bright, determined. She took her schoolwork seriously in the way that kids do when they understand that education is a door and they intend to walk through it. She was days away from graduating from Ralph Bunche Middle School. Days away. She had been excited about her graduation dress, a pretty white dress for the ceremony. That was the thing on her mind that June. Her dress, her diploma, her summer, everything that was supposed to come next. On the morning of Wednesday, June 7th, 1995, Nacole left her apartment with her older sister and a friend. It was a warm Atlanta morning, the kind of morning that feels full of possibility when you are 14 years old and school is almost over and the whole summer is sitting just ahead of you. Like a gift, they were walking to school together. Just a normal Wednesday morning. And then Nacole remembered she had a project due that day. She had left it at home. She turned around. She waved goodbye to her sister and her friends. She told them she'd catch up, and she took a shortcut through the nearby wooded area off Campbellton Road, a path she knew, a path other kids used. Nothing about that morning suggested she should be afraid. She never caught up. The woods off Campbellton Road were not far from the Deerfield Apartments, maybe a few minutes on foot, close enough that you could hear the traffic from the road. At some point on that path through the woods, a man confronted Nacole Smith. He raped her, and then he shot her twice in the face. 2 security guards working at the nearby apartment complex heard the gunshots. They ran toward the sound. They found Nacole in the woods. Her book bag was beside her. Inside it was her identification and her address. Back at the Deerfield Apartments, Aquinelia. Smith heard the shots. Then she heard the helicopter. Then there was a knock at her door. 2 Atlanta police officers were standing there. She dropped to her knees. "Please, Lord," she said later, I don't wish this on anybody else, but please let this not be my child. It was her child. At the funeral home, Aquinelia identified her daughter. She looked at Nacole's face. She could see that Nacole had been crying. The tears had dried on her face. I want you to sit with that for a moment. A 14-year-old girl, crying in the woods, alone. She deserves so much better than that morning. The Atlanta Police Department responded immediately and massively. Detectives interviewed hundreds of people. They took blood samples from at least 50 men connected to the area. They canvassed the neighborhood. They chased every lead and every tip that came in from the community. DNA evidence was collected from the scene. In 1995, DNA technology was still in its early stages, but investigators had a DNA profile from Nacole's case. They had a shell casing from a 9mm weapon. They had everything they needed, except a name to match it to. The case went cold. Not because the Atlanta Police Department stopped caring. They never stopped caring, but the leads ran out. The DNA had no match. The shell casing matched nothing. And a 14-year-old girl who had waved goodbye to her sister on a Wednesday morning remained without justice. Years passed. Then a detective named Vince Velasquez did something that would define his career. In 2002, he reopened Nacole's case on his own, not because he was assigned to it, because he couldn't let it go. In June of 2004, 9 years after Nacole Smith was murdered, a 13-year-old girl named Betty Brown was pulled into the woods on Connolly Drive in East Point, Georgia. About 3 miles from where Nacole died, Betty Brown was raped, but she survived. Investigators collected evidence from Betty's case and entered it into the National DNA database. The result came back immediately. The DNA matched Nacole's killer has struck again. Detective Velasquez said it plainly. That means Nacole's killer was back. Now investigators had 2 victims, 2 crime scenes, 2 sets of evidence pointing at the same man. What they didn't have was a name. The DNA matched nothing in any database. The man who killed Nacole Smith and raped Betty Brown was a ghost, known only by his DNA, hidden somewhere in a city of millions. Betty Brown survived that June in 2004. She carried what happened to her quietly for years. She deserved to face the man who hurt her in a courtroom. She deserved to see him answer for what he did. She never got that. Neither did Aquinelia Smith. The years kept passing. In 2006, the case was featured on America's Most Wanted. It went national. Tips came in. Nothing matched. Detective Velasquez worked the case until his own retirement in 2017. He handed Nacole's file to the next detective and walked away from the job, but not from Nacole. The detective who took over was named Scott DeMeester. He was 3 months older than Nacole Smith. He had been a high school freshman when she was killed in those woods off Campbellton Road. He understood what this case meant. DeMeester watched as genealogy, the same technology that had identified the Golden State Killer in California in 2018, began transforming cold cases across the country. He knew what he had to do. Working with the Georgia Bureau of Investigation's Forensic Lab and using ancestral DNA databases, He began the slow, meticulous work of building a family tree from Nacole's killer's DNA. It took 3 years. Then just after Christmas 2021, the lab called with news that Scott DeMeester had been waiting his entire career to hear. They had a match. The DNA profile from Nacole Smith's murder in 1995 and Betty Brown's assault in 2004 belonged to a man named Kelvin Arnold. He was 49 years old. He had been born in April of 1972, which meant he was just 23 years old when he walked into those woods on a Wednesday morning in June of 1995 and crossed paths with a 14-year-old girl carrying a forgotten project in her book bag. He had lived in Atlanta his whole life, the city that had been searching for him for 26 years. DeMeester said the first call he made was to Nacole's mother. "I was just glad to be able to make that phone call to Mrs. Smith," he said, but the call carried devastating news alongside the answer. Kelvin Arnold had died on August 29th, 2021, in hospice care in Fulton County, liver and kidney failure. He died just weeks before investigators identified him. He was never charged, never arrested, never put in handcuffs, never made to sit in a courtroom and look at Nacole Smith and explain what he did to her daughter. He died in a hospice bed and took whatever answers he had with him. On January 4th, 2022, the Atlanta Police Department held a press conference at their headquarters. Nacole Smith was there. Betty Brown was there. Active and retired detectives who had worked Nacole's case over 26 years were there. Vince Velasquez came back. Reginald Boone, the detective who had been first on the scene in 1995, who had touched Nacole's neck to check for signs of life, was there. Nacole Smith stood at the microphone and spoke through tears. "Today for me is a bittersweet moment," she said. "I never imagined this person to be deceased. So many unanswered questions that I had for him that I could never ask or get answers. I would never say it was closure for me because I'll live with this pain for the rest of my life." Betty Brown spoke too. "I'm not okay with the situation on how long it took us to get here," she said, "but I'm happy that we are finally here and that he is no longer out there able to do the things that he did to me and Nacole and to others." She paused. "This is a bittersweet moment. I'm mad that I didn't get that opportunity to face him." Investigators noted that they believe there may be other victims of Kelvin Arnold between 1995 and 2004, crimes that left no DNA evidence. He was never tied to any other confirmed crimes, but Detective Velasquez said, plainly, "I don't believe someone rapes and kills a young girl in 1995 and then rapes another 13-year-old girl in 2004, and they haven't done anything in between." Nacole Smith was 14 years old. She was a straight A student. She was days away from graduating middle school. She was excited about a white dress for the ceremony. She had a whole life sitting just ahead of her on that Wednesday morning in June. College, a career, summers that didn't end in those woods. A mother who got to grow old, watching her daughter become everything she was capable of becoming. She waved goodbye to her sister. She took a shortcut she had taken before and she never came home. Kelvin Arnold never faced justice for what he did to Nacole Smith and Betty Brown. The law never got to touch him. He died in a hospice bed in the city where he committed these crimes and took every answer with him into the ground. But Nacole's name is known. Her story is told. Her mother stood at a microphone 26 years later and spoke her daughter's name into a room full of people who had never stopped working to find the truth. That is not closure. Aquinelia Smith told us that herself. But it is something. It is what they left behind. This has been what they left behind. I'm Savannah Cole. If you grew up in Atlanta, if you remember that summer, I hope this felt like honoring her the way she deserved. Nacole Smith was almost home. Remember her name.